morning and welcome to Keeping You Connected. My name is Mavis Johnson Colley and I will be your moderator for this morning's exciting and informative webinar. These webinars have been designed to engage with an increased number of our stakeholders to ensure that you have all the information that you need to engage with service providers in the sectors that we regulate, and to also help you understand what we at URCA have been doing, particularly during this pandemic, to ensure that you are able to enjoy the same level of services that you enjoyed pre the pandemic, particularly since so many of you are using services in the electronic communication sector. And so without any further ado, let's get this show started. This is for many of our friends and some of our viewers in other areas, a day of celebrating Thanksgiving. And so we want to also give thanks for his blessings on us. And so we will invite our Consumer Protection Officer, Mrs. Daniela Pratt, to give our invocation.
Thank you, Mavis, and good morning, everyone. Heads bowed, eyes closed. Father God, we come to you this morning, giving you thanks and praise, Lord, for another day, dear Lord, for your mercies upon us, Lord. Lord, we ask that your protection and your guidance over today's event, Lord, as we at URCA share knowledge, dear Lord, to the general public. Lord, we ask that what is discussed here, that it empowers persons, dear Lord, to understand our role, dear Lord, and to understand the importance of the electronic communication sector, Lord. Lord, we thank you for our speakers and other participants, Lord, and we ask that you grant them the wisdom and the knowledge, dear Lord, to share with us. We thank you and we praise you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Daniela. We must always go to God in prayer before we do anything to invoke his blessings on our proceedings. And, you know, we have had some wonderful experiences with these webinars. We've been able to reach a very large audience. We are both live on the Facebook page, URCA, 242 URCA. And so please share with your friends and family. I know some of us in the Bahamas, even though we are not in America, some of us in the Bahamas are celebrating Thanksgiving. And so we promise you that we're only going to take a short bit of your time to engage with you this morning. We believe we have vital information for you. We will give you a little bit more information on how you can engage with us and our panelists right after we hear from our Acting Director of Electronic Communications at URCA, Ms. Dr. Walden Russell, who is going to come now with our opening remarks. Dr. Walden?
The year 2020 has proven that the activities of the Utilities Regulation and Competition Authority, URCA, as the regulator of both the electricity and the electronic communications sector, play a vital role in virtual and remote living. URCA's team is focused on the sectors we regulate, our roles and responsibilities in those sectors, and the regulatory work URCA undertook to ensure the availability of critical utilities services, both in ordinary times and times of disaster and disaster emergencies. Today, we conclude the series of webinars with a focus on the electronic communication sector, the ECS. The ECS is made up of fixed and mobile telecommunications, broadcasting, internet, pay TV services, the service providers, and the consumers of those services. The year 2019 marked 10 years of URCA as a regulator of the ECS. Since URCA's inception, we have focused on improving the regulatory framework, removing barriers to entry, and ensuring fair competition in the sector, amongst other things. Our work continues to shape national policy, such as the electronic communications policy, and influence regional and international initiatives that inform the global telecommunications landscape. Today, some of URCA's experts will discuss topics including strengthening the resilience of critical infrastructure, emerging wireless technologies, and international engagement. We hope that today's webinar will allow you, our viewers, to garner an understanding of how URCA is working to improve the lives of the people in the sectors we regulate. Enjoy the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Russell, for your opening remarks. I believe we might hear from you a little later as you share with us some of the highlights of some other work that we might be doing. But let's get our panel discussion started. And I want to introduce to you our panelists for this morning's webinar. We have three young and dynamic members of the electronic communication sector at URCA. We have Mr. Charles Kemp. Mr. Kemp is no stranger to URCA. He has been with the organization since its pre-URCA days. He is we call him an expert in the area of broadcasting. He serves as an advisor to the electronic communication sector. We also have Mr. Clinton Ramming, an engineer. He is an regulatory officer, technical in the electronic communication sector. And Ms. Cyan Prasad, who is the international relations officer in our international and government relations unit. And so without any further ado, we're gonna jump right into the session. And for our viewers, our panelists will answer a series of questions. Please feel free to send your questions to us. Enter your questions in the Q&A section on your screen. Those of you who are viewing via Facebook, you can enter your questions there for our panelists, and our team is monitoring the Facebook and they will ensure that your questions are addressed. And so we want to talk about what URCA has been doing in the electronic communication sector. You heard our director share with you the areas that we regulate. And I'm sure that you will agree with me that those areas are very critical to the continuity of business and to what has now been called online living as a result of the pandemic, COVID-19. And we know that URCA has been involved in some critical work to assist and ensure that service providers are able to provide the services at the standard that our consumers have become accustomed and even beyond. And so our first questions go to Charles. Charlie, what is URCA doing to ensure that critical infrastructure is available, will be available before and during disasters? Now, we've had a series of disasters over the last 18 months, particularly with the passage of Hurricane Dorian that decimated parts of our archipelago. And now we have this pandemic. So what have we done to ensure infrastructure is able to survive?
Good morning, Avis, and good morning to our listening audience. Just to give you some background of what URCA is really doing to ensure that critical infrastructure will be available before, during, and after a disaster. I would just like to start out by saying, presently, URCA is in the act of publishing a set of regulations on ICT for disaster management. That should be coming into effect during the first trimester of 21. The document outlines what CSIPs, and that's critical electronic communications infrastructure providers should do to their network to make them more resilient before, during, and after a disaster. It also referenced what URCA may do through deregulations and relaxing certain licensing requirements of the equipment that may be designated for disaster mitigation and relief. Now, the purpose of these regulations is to really put in place measures that would strengthen the critical infrastructure here in the Bahamas. In the event we are faced with some natural disaster or natural emergency in one form or another, the question may ask then, so what does that mean? Well, it means that cell phone networks and operators and other critical infrastructure will become more robust. And becoming more robust, as a result, services can be restored in relatively a short period of time. This can result in, I would say, businesses and other service operations being back in operation with reliable communication services that we all know a lot of them heavily really rely on. And let us just take, say, for example, Hurricane Dorian. It literally took months for one of the critical infrastructures to be restored in certain areas of Abaco and Grand Bahama. And I'm sure we're all aware of what happened there. What that resulted in, the communication services just taking as long to get back online, which has really, say, taken a toll on business activities in those islands who were really trying to recover from that devastating hurricane. With the set of regulations that URCA is hoping to introduce, I would say that the critical infrastructure would be strengthened and minimal damage, if any at all, may have little effect on critical communications infrastructure and the disruption of services in any meaningful way. And basically, these regulations will help situations where we would have these disasters where networks would be up and running in a shorter period of time and not how the length of time it took, as you know, with Hurricane Dorian. And thank you, Mavis, for that question.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the highlights of the document?
Okay, the highlights of the document. I just would like to say that the regulations that are being proposed, right? I would say the proposed establishment and introduction of a multi-stakeholder group, which will be referred to as the Electronic Communications Sector Disaster Management Group, task group that is, and the purpose of, the real purpose of this task group will be to, say, assist URCA with determining approaches for already the CC. And what we call CC, that's the critical electronic communications infrastructure. Another highlight, I would say, having in place a national roaming agreement between CSIPs, as I mentioned before, being critical electronic communications infrastructure providers that would kick in once it become known that there is a disaster or a pending disaster that is announced by the government of the Bahamas as such. What this will really do is allow operators to roam on other networks, on one another networks in the event of a pending or disaster. And basically, I would say they are some of the highlights in this document.
Okay, awesome. tell us, so because you mentioned infrastructure sharing, did we get buy-in from key service providers? Were they involved in the development of this regulation?
Definitely, Mavis. We went out to a consultation and we had respondents. And even prior to that, what we had done, we had invited all the key stakeholders that would have been NEMA, the Met Office, the police, the Royal Defense Force, and other members of the general public to sort of give us some insight as to some of the things that we could do to assist in this. So yes, we did involve quite a bit. In fact, what we did, we had two public consultations. We had one where we had at least three respondents, and we had to go back out because we was taking into consideration some of the things they would have mentioned in the document. And going back to a second consultation, we have now arrived to a final document that would be published, like I say, perhaps in the first trimester of next year.
Excellent. That is very critical, very important. And we always tell stakeholders, consumers, the general public, that you must follow us and you must participate in our consultation process, because I cannot overemphasize the importance of participating in our consultation process. You get to be a part of the development of critical regulatory instruments to guide the work. And now, my final question to you, Charles, before we move on, does the document address emergencies or things such as what we're in now, a pandemic?
Well, yes, Mavis. Having reviewed, I would say, a number of international regulatory frameworks on emergency telecommunications, and in particular, the second Global Forum on Emergency Communications that was organized by the International Telecommunications Union, the development sector. And I must add that the Bahamas really is a member of the ITU, and the ITU is really the oldest arm of the United Nations. And I may add, and recognizing really the national disasters in different forms, and I would say most cases usually have devastating effects on countries and also on the poor. What these disasters really do is disrupt national economies, for one. They also severely weakens the poor, and in a lot of cases become, I would say, major impediments to sustainable development. And what the study also found is that the impact is even worse when there's no access to basic information and communications facilities to provide alerting and vital information.
No, go ahead, come finished.
I was going to say, so the Bahamian public can relate to this while, we look back in recent times where we had a number of devastating hurricanes, like you had mentioned at the outset, that knocked out our communication systems and also damaged a lot of homes, right? More recently, in the wake of Hurricane Dorian, that really swept through the islands of Abaco and also Grand Bahama. Numerous lives was lost in that, and most of the communications was lost that may have contributed to some of those losses. I just would like to reiterate here, though, that studies conducted by these international organizations, such as the United Nations and the International Telecommunications Union.
Mhm.
What they really did was show that by introducing regulatory measures that say facilitates, encourages, and also promote disaster management on a national level, it really reduces risk associated with communications infrastructure. So basically, to conclude this, I would say that these are some of the reasons, apart from what we ourselves experience, why URCA embarked on developing a national policy document for regulating, I would say, the ICT, what is information and communications technology for disaster management. And basically, yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Thank you so much, Charles. And so we want to invite those of you who are viewing and you've gotten all excited about this regulatory measure and what it's intended to do and want to learn more, please visit our website, www.urcabahamas.bs. You can download the document. If for some reason you're having some trouble accessing it, please email us at info@urcabahamas.bs so that we can ensure that you are able to have a full read of the document and get an understanding of exactly what URCA is trying to accomplish with the implementation of the regulation. We want to ensure that you're able to stay connected, especially now. And so, you know, we have the ability to ensure that our infrastructure is stable and that it's resilient. So what do we do with that? We want to ensure that we are encouraging innovation, that we are supporting the government's national policy on electronic communications, which means that we want to see the members of the public using new technology, engaging with new technology, and where necessary, URCA will develop the necessary regulation. And so Clinton Ramming is going to share with us information about the emerging technologies and those likely to impact our work in the sector. Clinton?
Very pleasant good morning, Mavis, and thank you so much for your question. Good morning to my fellow colleagues on the panel and to the attendees in the Zoom room and our Facebook audience. So the two emerging technologies that I have decided to speak to today is HAPS. They are HAPS and 5G. So the acronym HAPS stands for High Altitude Platform System. And what that is essentially is an aircraft operating at between 20 to 50 kilometers, providing broadband services. And I can see that this can be extremely useful, especially in remote areas and rural communities, such as the Family Islands. In addition, in terms of natural disasters, that's also a prime use and purpose for the development of HAPS, where HAPS is a very rapidly deployable broadband wireless platform that can be used before and in the aftermath of a natural disaster to provide broadband wireless communications and telecommunication services, especially to help to restore critical infrastructure to provide those critical services such as 911 operations and other very critical services. So the next emerging technology that I will speak to is 5G. As we know, 5G is the fifth mobile technology generation. It's the fifth generation of mobile technology. 5G builds upon its predecessor, the 4G, with speeds of more than 10 times that of 4G. And now I want to touch briefly on some news that has been in the public and social media over the past few months since the pandemic began. There's been a lot of news about circulating on social media about 5G and its connection or correlation to the COVID-19 virus. And today we want to dispel those myths and those fake news. April 27th, the URCA issued a press release that pretty much stated that the WHO, the World Health Organization, and its partners found that there was no scientific evidence that connected or linked 5G to the COVID-19 virus. So I say also, in addition, the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, also released a statement stating that there is no scientific evidence that remotely suggests that 5G causes the COVID-19 virus. So please disseminate this information, this message to your WhatsApp group, to your friends in Machitown, Inagua, to your brothers and sisters in McLeanstown, Grand Bahama, and to your uncles and aunts in Johnson Bay, South Andrews, that there is no scientific evidence that 5G causes COVID-19 virus. Thank you very much, Mavis.
Thank you, Clinton, for clearing that up. All of our social media has been lit up concerning the myths about 5G and what is going on. I don't think we can overemphasize that. We've even seen rumors of them connecting it to the vaccine. And so you are saying that there is no evidence to support the rumors about the negative health effects from 5G.
That's correct, Mavis. The Health Authority, the WHO, World Health Organization, and also the Telecommunications Authority, the ITU, International Telecommunications Union, both stated that there is no correlation between the 5G network and the COVID-19 virus. However, URCA randomly conducts compliance checks, especially with the cellular communications services here in the Bahamas. And we do that to ensure that those service providers and the level of radiation that is being emitted is in line and complies with international health and safety standards. So at this time, I just want to say that there is we have no knowledge that 5G service is being offered here in the Bahamas today as well. So I just want to put that out there too.
So two major takeaways. No correlation to health issues, pandemic, and 5G. And as of the staging of this webinar, no knowledge of the deployment of 5G by any of our licensees.
That's correct.
Thank you so much. But before we move from 5G, Clinton, I know you told us that it's the 5th generation of mobile technology. But for maybe we have a couple viewers, listeners who are not quite up to speed. Are you in a position to give us a little distinction between the 4G and the 5G?
Yes, I am. Like I mentioned, 5G data rates, its internet speed or data speeds is more than 10 times that of 4G, which has pretty much a limit of 100 megabits per second. So 5G is a gigabit per second technology operating in the millimeter wave bands. In addition, 5G is a very short range technology that ranges perhaps up to about 100 feet. So with 5G, there would need to be many base stations deployed in a very small area to obtain the coverage that is desired with 5G. Hopefully that helps to answer some of your questions. And also, I just want to state, 5G is a quintessential underlying technology for other emerging technologies, such as biometrics, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and many others. And this would come in would be very useful in applications such as smart cities and autonomous or driverless vehicles. So 5G is a major component to offering advanced services in any developed or underdeveloped nation.
And we will be ready for it at URCA once it gets here, correct?
Yes, we will.
During the pandemic, Clinton, have we done what we spoke with Charlie earlier, who spoke about some of the regulations that regulatory measures that we have in place that we're looking at to ensure that our consumers and our providers are able to maintain services during and after disasters, pandemics. What about zooming in on our licensees? Is there anything in particular we have done to assist them during this time? Have we done anything with our licensing regime, for example? Have we made that a smooth, I know that it always been smooth, but have we made any adjustments there to further aid and assist our licensees during this time?
Once again, thank you very much for your question, Mavis. So the licensing department has had two changes in the licensing regime. One, as it relates to what we call eSIMs, which I will expound on later. And the other is the revision of the National Spectrum Plan 2020-2023. So I will begin with eSIMs. So eSIM stands for Earth Station in Motions. What it is, it's a satellite service. So it's pretty much a satellite terminal being placed on vessels, airplanes, on vessels and airplanes that are in motion. So over the years, our international stakeholders, our satellite service providers, they have been making some requests to URCA in regards to its pricing structure on eSIMs. So this year, the licensing department had a meeting, had a lot of discussions, and we came up with a new tariff structure, a new pricing structure for eSIMs. And with this structure, it allows our satellite service providers to offer this critical service to their clients. And in addition, it also helps to facilitate the uptake of eSIMs in the Bahamas, which is in line with one of the key electronic communication policy objectives as outlined in the Communications Act that states to further the interests of consumers by promoting competition and in particular, promoting investment and innovation in electronic communications networks and services. The second major change we had in the licensing regime this year was the revision of the National Spectrum Plan that we got approved from the government of the Bahamas. And in that plan, the National Spectrum Plan, we identified a number of bands as premium spectrum bands. And what that does, it gives entrepreneurs, service providers, current service providers and future service providers an opportunity to be able to access that very critical and valuable piece of real estate that we call radio spectrum. And that is essential. The radio spectrum is essential to be able to deploy 5G services and other services that falls under the IMT 2020 umbrella, such as Internet of Things. So today, anyone can come to us for this premium real estate to offer services and to offer emerging technologies here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Well, thank you. Now, we know there was a lot of technical jargon in there, and so we invite viewers, if there is anything you need further explained, please feel free to indicate that in the chat, in the Q&A section of the Zoom space. And if you are on Facebook, viewing us via Facebook Live, please don't forget to type your questions, and our panelists will be happy to explain. And I may be asking Clinton to go back as he spoke about the adjustments in the licensing regime. He connected it to the emerging technologies. I just want to have him emphasize or repeat or share the aspects of the adjustments that was reciprocated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Were there any special adjustments as a result of COVID-19?
Yes, there was. And I'm glad that you asked that. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic and the government imposed restrictions at the time in response to the pandemic. It forced many businesses to scramble to adapt to this new norm without much warning. Here at URCA, our ability to be agile and truly adaptive enabled us through our business continuity plan to truly embrace the opportunities brought on by this unforeseen and unexpected set of events. And I believe that URCA and the licensing department rose to the occasion and met these challenges head on. And what we did was we changed some of the licensing processes to suit this new environment that we now found ourselves in. For the most part, we did not miss a beat with the licensing process. And given the streamlined approach taken in our business operations, I found that many facets, many aspects of the licensing processes became even more effective and much more efficient. For example, I will speak to one of the licensing process, which involves the authorization of low power devices being imported into the Bahamas by various manufacturers. So our requirements prior to the COVID-19 pandemic was that applicants applying on behalf of these manufacturers were required to submit application via mail, some people call it snail mail, courier services, or you may walk in and drop off your applications at our office there on Frederick Street. So this process with our international stakeholders resulted in processing times of about 3 to 6 weeks on average. And as a result of this adjustment to our licensing process, we were able to drastically decrease that processing time from 3 to 6 weeks to 1 to 2 weeks. And just a few weeks ago, I sent out a communication to the department informing them that we had reached a new milestone, a new accomplishment where we were successfully able to process an application the very same day. And this speaks to our ability to be adaptive and to put in place very efficient processes. And it is our intention that we would continue to ensure that during a pandemic, during a natural disaster, that no one is left behind, and that everyone, every Bahamian resident, every Bahamian consumer, service providers, that they are all able to stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Clinton. Excellent job. And just before I let you go, you introduced a term, and we just want to make sure that our viewers understand exactly what we're talking about. And yes, our viewers know that we are the multi-sector regulator for electricity and for electronic communications. And they are aware of our major licensees in the Bahamas. But you mentioned type approval. Is there another area that we're involved in that maybe you want to just give us a 2-sentence clarification to draw some examples so that our viewers can understand the scope of our work, not just those operators they can see and feel in the Bahamas that we license?
Thank you, Mavis. Thank you so much for the question. One of the important areas in any regulatory regime is spectrum management. And under spectrum management comes, there's a number of responsibilities, a number of tasks that falls under spectrum management, such as spectrum monitoring. So spectrum monitoring involves conducting compliance checks, conducting occupancy surveys to see who's operating in the spectrum, if they should be operating, who's operating outside of the licensing parameters. And we do this to ensure that, to reduce the probability of harmful interference. And that's one of our key tasks in the spectrum management area. And this is something that we look to take into the new year, especially as it relates to FM broadcasting services. We do intend to go to the Family Islands and to ensure that there is very limited interference, very limited hopefully no instances of unlicensed activities. And so we will be doing these checks to ensure that our licensees, that they are given and provided the protection that they deserve and that we are obligated to give to them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clinton. We're gonna, and you mentioned that. I'm glad you did, and we'll deal with that, address that next year in more depth. But I wanted you to just explain further. You mentioned the changes in the licensing process as it related to COVID-19, and you gave us an example. And so I just wanted you to touch on, when you say type application, type approval, sorry. I wanted you to just share with our viewers that area of the work that we do and what comes in, what does that category of work for us include?
Well, type approvals, I think it falls under it's a license exempt category. And what
And
type
what are
of
some of the things that we are reviewing or we are approving when we talk about type approval? For example, I tell people that anything that operates remotely using the spectrum, we have to have some oversight of registered approval. Am I correct in that?
Yes. So type approvals essentially are an authorization required by the regulator that allows manufacturers to import or ship their low power devices, such as cellular phones, Bluetooth car radios, earbuds and wireless earphones, those type of devices. They are required to, manufacturers are required to have a type approval certification from URCA before they're able to import these low power devices into the Bahamas so that consumers would have access to these low power devices.
What about my fan that I turn on and off remotely?
No, Mavis fans is not a low power device. So that would not
Okay.
fall under that category. You can just go to Kelly's or whomever and pick up your fan without any issues. Just go away, bring in your fans. There's no certification, no authorization, a special authorization necessary for those type of equipment. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Clinton. And ladies and gentlemen, you know, I want you to know that for this webinar, our director has given us his best, and it's all of their first time with us on the webinars, and they are doing an excellent job. Thank you so very much, Clinton, for that wealth of information that you've just shared with us. And it tells us that we definitely have to do follow-up sessions to delve deeper into the areas that you mentioned. A reminder to please send us your questions. We are getting ready to move into our last segment for this morning. So please send us your questions. Write them in the Facebook, on the Facebook page. If you're watching by Facebook, you can send them. Of course, you can enter them in the Q&A in the Zoom space. And now we're going to talk a little bit about our work in the international regional arena. As was mentioned in the opening remarks, URCA's work is guided by the National Electronic Communications Policy, which is put out by government, reviewed, revised every 3 years. That policy speaks to the direction the government wishes to take electronic communications in the country. It speaks to some of the innovations they like to see. It speaks to their goals for the sector. We know, for example, that there is a push to develop technology hubs in the country. And so URCA's regulatory work is guided by those objectives. URCA also represents the government on international and regional bodies that shape the direction for electronic communications. These bodies shape it for the world. URCA then shapes it for the Bahamas. And so we work with these organizations. We have a team that works with them. And coming to tell us a little bit more about what we have been doing in recent times with these organizations and the impact that work is having on what is happening in the Bahamas and the impact we are having on the work that is being done globally is our International Relations Officer, Sayan Prasad. Welcome, Sayan, to URCA's webinar series, and we're gonna pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mavis, for the opportunity, and good morning, everyone. And also thank you to my colleagues, Clinton and Charles, for that, what I found to be very informative information. So I'd like to start off by addressing this question to say that our vision here at URCA is to be a globally respected regulator, championing the interest of people in the Bahamas and also those within our sector. So in order for us to do that, the government has formally delegated to URCA its representation at specialized agencies and bodies such as the ITU, CTEL, and also CTU. And we'll get into those, what they mean later on. So I'd like to start building this out for you. And it starts at the top, which is the ITU. And that's the International Telecommunications Union. And one of the interesting things about this organization is that it is the specialized agency for the United Nations, which handles telecommunications and ICT policies specifically. And the Bahamas has such a unique position because we are one of the 48 member states in the world to have a seat on the ITU's council. And what that gives us is not only an opportunity to be a part of this organization, but it allows us to remain globally competitive and also to give Bahamians the opportunities that are available to the other developed countries and other developing countries. So I'd like to think that the ECS sector is a critical component in the promotion of access to ICTs. So think of it as an artery through which ICTs enable social and economic development. And in order to continue this train of thought, you really need to seize the information. And the ITU provides us not only the opportunity to seize, but we also have the opportunity to gain access to a plethora of resources and experts and funds. And one of our objectives here in the International Relations and Government Relations Department is that we want to bring this information home to our policymakers, to our government, and to our industries to help advance the ECS policy objectives and also the objectives of the government. So how do we do that? Well, we need to fine tune it because there's so much information, and as my colleague Clinton had touched on very well, he talked about emerging technologies. And the reality is that these emerging technologies are becoming more prevalent and more relevant as we advance into this digital era. And as for our country, we do not want to be left behind. So we now have the ability to advance these resources coming out of the ITU, coming out of CTEL, because we have information on 5G, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and big data as well. So we want to create a learning environment for our regulators so that we can provide to you the information necessary to advance our national objectives. So aside from the ITU, we're also doing a lot of work in what's called the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission, also known as CTEL. And CTEL comprises of about 9 countries, and that makes up the Americas region, which the Bahamas is located in. And other countries, just to give you an idea, include America, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, and a few other Latin American, Caribbean countries. So this gives us an opportunity not only to advance our national objectives and interests, but to provide feedback to a more regional effort so that we also can be leaders rather than takers. So we are helping other countries develop and shape policies when it comes to a number of things, which we'll later discuss. And I think that this opportunity is not only for greater collaboration, but for us to be on a same narrative with our neighbors. So we also have CTEL, and we also have CARICOM, and we also have the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, which we all work very close together to achieve our national objectives. Thank you, Mavis.
Thank you, Cyan, for that comprehensive overview. And we have a few minutes left before we go to questions. I'm going to ask you to just briefly highlight some of those projects that or developments that we are involved in currently, internationally, regionally, that impact the Bahamas in this particular sector?
Right. Thank you, Mavis. Right. So when it comes to developments that specifically impact the Bahamas, we here at URCA, we must align our objectives from our strategic planning to our national objectives, and we need to bring it home and then say, okay, what do we need to follow at a regional and an international level? So I picked out a few that we are committed to in terms of following, researching, and developing on. And one of them is to increase confidence and security in the use of telecoms and ICTs, such as issues relating to cybersecurity. Another one that we're interested in is the access to telecom services by persons with disabilities and other specific needs. And another one I think is very important is the promotion of digital financial inclusion and the development of digital regional markets. And that's very important because as we transition into a digital era, you'll see that our government is more interested in using e-commerce platforms. And we want to digitalize and change a lot of the processes we have in place. And this is the right place to get information on how best we can go about doing this. And lastly, I'd say that we are committed to exchanging information and also the production of policies that help to regulate disaster risk reduction, emergency care and recovery, and also figuring out and developing policies that shape telecommunication and ICTs in climate change, and also the circular economy as we move towards a safer and more sustainable developing economy.
Thank you so very much, Cyan. And so to our viewers, and so when you see us traveling, we are traveling to ensure that the Bahamas is at the forefront, that the Bahamas continues to be on the cutting edge of technology, and that we are ensuring that decisions that are made around the world take our best interest into consideration. And as you can see, we have quite an able and capable team leading that cause for us. And so now we are going to turn to a couple of questions that we've gotten so far from our viewers. We invite you to keep those questions coming. Our first question, and any of the panelists, you feel free to answer. And this question has to do with licensing for internet service provider. What license is needed to start an internet service?
Thank you very much, Mavis. I will address this question. For internet service, your typical standard internet service, an individual spectrum license would be needed, and perhaps another license. But what we really do require is that you submit an application so that we can review your application in full to determine that we are issuing the correct type of license for the service you are providing. So it's not until we actually see the exact service you're providing that we're able to make a full determination on the type of license that you require.
Thank you, Clinton. And this other question says, when will spectrum coverage frequency be available to the few licensees who were pushed off the grid by error in New Providence? I am not gonna touch that one. I'm gonna shoot it right over to my capable ECS team.
Well, I guess I'll take this one too. Just want to say that here in New Providence, there is a geographical and frequency spacing issue that makes it impractical to really have another high-powered FM station here in New Providence at the moment. I'm unable to answer when will a frequency, so to speak, become available. But when one does, what likely will happen is that there will be a competitive process due to the scarcity of FM frequencies here on the island of New Providence. So that's my best response to that particular question.
Thank you so very much. Do we have any final thoughts from our panelists? I see one more question that's coming in before we go to final thoughts. What is and this question, yeah, we'll answer that question right after we get final thoughts. It's about complaint filing, and we do have that on our agenda. So stay tuned, viewer. We will tell you how to file a complaint. Any final thoughts before we speak to the issue of complaints, consumer complaints processing? And we can start in any order. Charles, since we've had Clinton talking quite a bit, you want to start with you, Charles? Can you unmute your mic, Charlie? Good, there you go.
Yes, okay, and which question is that you're asking?
Just any final thoughts and anything that you've shared and what your colleagues have shared thus far.
Well, what I could say that concerning spectrum and also licenses, I think Clinton would have covered quite a bit of the information regarding those questions that was asked. And I just would like to say a little bit more about the spectrum and the spectrum plan, like Clinton had indicated. Spectrum, as we know, is a scarce commodity. And what it really is that persons who would like to offer certain types of services, and let's take for example services like cellular services. As you know, today there are only 2 service providers here in the Bahamas that provide cellular services. However, the government do have a plan in place whereby there could be an additional service provider to offer cellular services. If it's a situation where you have an applicant who would like to come in and provide those services. So that being said, with scarce resources, we have to sort of manage that in a way that that is efficient and being used effectively and efficiently by users of the spectrum. And basically, as it relates to monitoring, Clinton would have mentioned quite a bit of that too. Presently, we are in the process of putting back in place, because prior to now, we did have a spectrum monitoring system in place, but since we had a few hurricanes and some real bad weather, it sort of took down the monitoring system. However, we are at this time in place working towards having that restored, and basically say within the next few months, we should have at least a portion of that system restored to do monitoring, to make sure that, like Clinton would have indicated, that licensees, they stays within their parameters in terms of the technical specifications, so as not to avoid any kind of form of harmful interference to other users of the spectrum. And basically on that, I think Clinton would have covered quite a bit on that. And yes, thank you for that.
Thank you, Charlie. Cyan, Clinton, any final thoughts?
Sure, Mavis, thank you again. I'd just like to say that listening to my colleagues and also having worked with them, I think it's important to note that our work is interdependent from, and when I look at it from the ITU's perspective, and I think it's the same here at URCA when we want to apply that interdependence in terms of radio communications, technical standards, and also our duty towards developing telecom policies. So I think that listening to my colleagues has really brought that to light. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyan. Clinton, any final thoughts? Clinton, we can't hear you.
Yes, I just wanted to speak briefly about emerging technologies as they play a pivotal role in the sustainable development of the Bahamas. And I just want to say that here at URCA, we are committed to doing the work that's required to ensure that all of our stakeholders are able to take advantage of the benefits of emerging technologies to ensure that each and every one is connected.
Awesome. And we want to just share with our viewers the importance of their giving us feedback on what we do. The regulatory regime or the regulations that we develop sometimes as a result of changes in the operating climate, changes in the industry worldwide, changes in the Bahamas, and sometimes as a result of feedback that we've received from various stakeholders. And so we invite you, there are so many ways in which you can engage with us. We on just about all of the social media platforms. You can reach us by email at info@urcabahamas.bs. You can certainly call us. We have a hotline number that you can call us at 242-393-0234. And I want to just briefly, before we leave you, tell us about the complaint handling process. We did get a question on that. If you have a complaint concerning any of the operators in the electronic communications sector or for any sector at that, for that matter, our regulations, and you will have heard our panelists speak to consultation processes, okay? So we were consulted on all of our processes, and the agreed process is that you first complain to the service provider. So if I have a complaint with service provider A, whether it's about billing, whether it's about false advertising information, whether it's about response to service requests, installation services, whether it's response to maintenance or repairs, you go to that service provider first. And the regulations currently require that you allow them a 30-day period to resolve your complaint. Now, they must answer and acknowledge your complaint within a much shorter period of time. But to resolve the complaint, you have to give them 30 days. If you're not satisfied with the method in which they have resolved the complaint, or you're not satisfied with the solution that they provided, or they did not respond within that 30-day period, then you can come to URCA and bring that complaint to URCA. URCA will then investigate, work with you, work with the service provider to bring a resolution to that complaint. And should at that level you not be satisfied, there is an appeal process. There is a further, before we get to the appeal process, and further investigative level that involves our regulatory team. And then if at that level you are not satisfied, there is an appeal process. So we invite you to make sure that you follow the process, because if you come to URCA before you've gone to the service provider, unless it's an emergency, we will have to refer you back to the service provider. And so again, please feel free. You can file your complaint via our website, which is www.urcabahamas.bs. And again, a repeat of the email, info@urcabahamas.bs. You can call us on our consumer hotline, which is 242-393-0263. I will repeat that, 242-393-0263. Our general lines, 242-396-5200. If you are in the Family Islands, please call our toll-free number, 242-300-URCA or 242-300-8722. Remember, we regulate for all of the Bahamas with very few exceptions. And so wherever you are in the Bahamas and you're experiencing issues, concerns, poor service, good service, you want to tell us about the good service, tell us that too, and we'll be happy to share that with the regulator. So we invite you to send us those complaints so that we can ensure, like Sian reminded you, that we are doing our best to improve lives through effective utilities regulation. And so we want to thank all of our presenters. I'm going to have our Consumer Education Officer, Daniela, come with a little bit more in her own way. Thank you to those who enable us to successfully launch not just this webinar, but the webinar series. Daniela?
Thank you, Mavis. And of course, thank you again to our panelists, Sian, Charles, Clinton, and of course you, Mavis, our moderator, and as well, Walden, the acting director of the sector. We also want to thank you, our viewing audience. We hope that this session and our previous sessions, of course, gave you a clearer insight into what URCA does and what our role is and how we impact lives. We also want to thank, of course, the production team, Blue Orchid, for hosting and managing this webinar. And thank you again. Good morning.
Thank you for your work, Daniela, who's been the lead in our department for the webinars, along with our other team member, Tamantra Cooper. And we are thanking everybody because this is our last one for the series for 2020. And our team from ECS has done such a wonderful job. We put you all on notice that come next year, we will be doing these more frequently and dedicating whole segments to one topic so that we can get all of the information in. We're going to take all of your comments into consideration, and feel free to continue to post your comments post the live webinar. You can reach us as you see and deem necessary. I do see a question. I don't know if my team will allow me to since I think I have 1 more minute before we our timing is has expired, and I think that's more. We answered the question about complaint, and somebody is complimenting us on the webinar, and I'd like to read that. It says, these webinars are extremely informative. I had no idea URCA regulated so many areas. When can they expect another one from URCA? And so, Daniela, I think they are putting you to work even before 2021 begins. And so we'll say to our viewers that you can stay tuned. We will be bringing you more informative webinars in 2021. We are the regulator of the electronic communication sector, so we have to lead by example. We cannot meet you in person, and so we're going to take our business and take our education educational activities to the platforms and to the space where you are. Thank you, everyone, and for those who are viewing from other parts of the world or those who are otherwise engaged today, enjoy your Turkey Day. Remember that whether we are a citizen of friends to the north, we ought to be thankful all day, all the days, every day, because there is still so much to be thankful for. And so we say to you, be blessed, Continue to follow us on all of our social media. Engage with us as we work to improve the lives of those we serve. Be safe, everyone, and thanks again.